public hearing to receive input and discuss the various options, routes, and plans for proposed recreational trail between Perry and Woodward, also called the Raccoon River Valley Trail to the High Trestle Trail. The Conservation Board, this is the second public hearing we've had on this matter. We had one previously a year ago in February before we met the contract to start the planning process. We also have another one planned for later this month in Waukee. The Conservation Board has contracted with Snyder and Associates to help plan a route for the trail. And Rich Volker is the chief engineer, and he's here to provide us information regarding the work so far.
Thank you. Welcome, everybody. Obviously, there's a lot of interest in this project, which is great to see. Looking at the connection of these two important trails, being the High Trestle Trail that comes out of Woodward, 25 miles down to Ankeny, and the Raccoon River Valley Trail, which is a large loop system in Dallas and Greene and Guthrie counties. Getting those two to connect with just a mere 9 miles seems like a short, fairly simple connection. Well, one of the things that's kind of tricky about it is both of those two trails started out as former railroad grades, and they were acquired soon after the railroad ceased operation. This is a section where the railroad ceased operation quite a long time ago, and all of the former railroad line went back into private hands. So none of this is necessarily available to us unless the current owner is willing to work with us for purchase of that former right-of-way. Now, so with that in mind, we have to consider that any, if we aren't able to purchase the old railroad right-of-way, we got to find another route. Well, starting out the feasibility study, these are the routes that we had in mind of what's kind of available and feasible for this connection between the trailhead here in Woodward and getting generally into Perry, but definitely we want to get to downtown as the ideal, and definitely get through Boughton as part of it. And one thing you'll notice as I go to the next slide is you'll start to see some of these lines drop away right off the bat. Namely, one of them is this one right here, where this is the old part of the old railroad grade. And we also had a line that was running down Beaver Creek. And it became fairly clear fairly early that those are not going to be available to us. This portion of the railroad grade is completely gone. It's been obliterated and is now cultivated. So that's definitely not available. And this is also completely along private property down Beaver Creek. So these are the alignments that we started to study. Obviously, our alignment A, our first and best option would be to follow the railroad grade as much as possible, and then where we can't, we figured we'd have to be in the county road right away or an adjacent easement. Again, if the property owners are willing to sell us some adjacent property to create some room for the trail. Beyond that, we have other alignment options. Alignment B, running down 130th, which is a paved county road. Alignment C that came down O Avenue, which is R30, also I believe goes up paved road up to Boughton, and then along the right-of-way of Highway 141. And we had some other connecting alignments that we study in case we have some good luck with certain property owners and not so good luck with others. Then we have options to get back and forth as we need to. Starting off in Perry, we really concentrated heavily on looking at the railroad grade. That would be most like what most of the other two trails are like right now. We did hear some good feedback from the property owner, so this is looking like a likely location. You can see this is what the railroad grade looks like today, and what each of the High Trestle Trail and the Raccoon River Valley Trail, this is what the pictures look like to start of those projects too. Another shot looking down the railroad right away, you can see what a decent trail that would make. It's grown up pretty good. Looks pretty overgrown, but the railroad grade itself should be fairly clear. Then once we get up the railroad grade to 130th Street, County Gravel Road, you can see here's where the railroad grade was, and you can see there's places where even the parcel lines are gone. but you just barely see any kind of a scar at all where the railroad grade went through. So we come up to 130th and then try to be within county right-of-way, maybe purchase easements adjacent to make a little bit of room, like a little better trail. And I apologize, all my pictures are view west, so if you get sick riding backwards in a car, I'll try to go slow. So the railroad grade kind of bends off to the left here in this direction through the trees. And here we get out on 130th Street on the south side of the road, adjacent to the gravel. And we've got a few photos along the south side. We've got it crossing a Beaver Creek, fairly unavoidable. We either need to put in a new trail bridge in this location or widen the existing bridge to accommodate a trail. And then on down the line, there's a reasonable amount of room here in the county road right-of-way to try and attempt to get a trail. Generally, when I'm looking at the trail cross-section, the trail is generally 10 feet wide with 2-foot shoulders on either side, so about 14 feet of flat is what you're looking for. So you can kind of see here it's going to be a little bit of a challenge. There's not a ton of room between where you would perceive the right-of-way line here along the corn or the edge of the roadway. Another one, the power poles are also a good indicator of where the right-of-way line is. Generally those will be just inside the right-of-way, so the trail would have to fit somewhere in between with that small space. Looking at the north side, again, old railroad right-of-way heading diagonally down to Perry. Looking at the north side, a little bit more room in this location, same problem with the bridge. Again, looking up the corridor, maybe a little bit more room in here, but generally a pretty strong forest slope that we have to deal with, and then somehow getting the trail in down here or benched in with the railroad. This is something to keep in mind, is the dust from traffic as we look at being adjacent to a gravel surface. Again, along the north side, and here we're approaching Highway 169. I guess that's this picture. So then looking from Highway 169 to Bowden, again our alignment A, the old railroad grade used to come through about here and then start to diagonal down. This is where it's gone. We do have the advantage in crossing Highway 169. We've got its bridge over Beaver Creek to where we can try to get down underneath that bridge, all within state highway right-of-way, which we'd be able to accommodate the trail. Then coming up to, this is called 128th Place, and we try to follow the county road in that location and then get into Bowden. So here we're looking at, starting again at the south side of 130th, heading underneath the bridge. This looks perfectly feasible, plenty of room. Looking up Highway 169, this is a view south, so you come out from underneath the bridge, and then there's a pretty significant forest slope grade down from the highway right of way, but there's also a lot of room. There's a lot of space out here. There's another view where you can see the big embankment. You can see the bridge down there, so you can kind of imagine where a trail might come in off of that embankment and come up here to 128th Place. Now, as we turn to 128th Place, you can see there's quite a wide right-of-way here, able to accommodate the trail. And then we start getting really tight. 128th Place has a very narrow right-of-way. There's not a lot of room from the edge of the road to the right-of-way line. Another very tight shot. You can see how little space there is there. And as we're approaching Bowden, maybe a little bit more room here, but not a lot. We could also cross, as we come across from Highway 169, we could cross 128th Place and come up the north side. But similarly, it gets a little tight in the right of way. And then there's this big hole in the ground. We've got the old railroad box culvert, and then it doesn't quite line up with the roadway culvert. So there's a situation here where there's not a lot of room for accommodation. We could probably figure something out there, get that all contained and put underground. The trail put on top, but that's not a cheap thing. Again, looking up, getting closer to Bowden, you can see the tightness of the right-of-way between the utility pole and the edge of the roadway, and then coming into Bowden on the north side. So that area is pretty tight, pretty tough. Again, as we get back into Boughton, we looked at a couple different things, either trying to get back on the railroad grade to head further east toward Woodward, or to potentially be on a side path situation, basically a wide sidewalk into town, or to actually let trail traffic just be on the low volume city street through the town. Looking east of Boughton, we've got our options here. Obviously the railroad grade is all still on its own individual parcels, it's still there. So we've got the potential of being able to find willing property owners to let us purchase that. Our fallback is 130th Street, County Road right-of-way, paved road, a lot more room than the 130th that's gravel or the 128th place that's gravel. On east toward Woodward, another section, same situation. We've got some potential alternative alignments if say we were able to use the railroad grade for a portion and then ran into a property owner that wasn't interested in working with us, then we'd be able to potentially use the county road to get back to our fallback roadway accommodation, or adjacent to roadway accommodation. Then heading into Woodward, the railroad grade starts to bend to the northeast. 130th comes in to this portion of town. Right now, these are just lines on a map. They're not meant to be precise or exact as to where the trail could be located. There's a lot of properties in here to talk to in terms of accommodation, but ultimately we know we need to get to the trailhead right here of the High Crystal Trail. I believe the city does own this first portion, but after that it's all in private ownership. So looking at 130th on the south side, lots of room. Can't see the county road sitting up on top, but there's quite a bit of right of way. Looking at the north side, similarly, pretty good ditch section in here, but that's also something that we're comfortable working with and trying to accommodate a trail within the right of way. And then of course we got the railroad grade, which is still our plan A if we can pull it off. So looking back to that trouble section where it was really tight, there's not a lot of options for us. There's not a lot of interest on the part of adjacent property owners to give us an easement to increase the roadway right of way and get the trail accommodated. So we're pretty much confined within that narrow county right of way within that section. So just again, show you 128th place and how narrow it is and how little room there is for accommodation. There's another good picture where there's just not a lot of space. You can see that there's that culvert issue again. And then up the line where there's just not a lot of room, kind of a church tree line right in there at the right of way line. So you start to think about, well, why not bike lanes? Bike lanes are used ever more frequently. It would involve paving that road, which wouldn't be inexpensive. But another thing that we think about in a project like this, I'm a transportation engineer, and a lot of the projects we do, we have a design vehicle. Sometimes we're designing for a semi, and its turning and how it pulls a trailer. Sometimes we're designing for a school bus. In this case, I consider this one of my design vehicles. Is this rider stable enough to be in a bike lane adjacent to 45-mile-an-hour traffic?
No.
Probably not. So I can just tell by the look of confidence on her face. There is a concept that's kind of being done in a lot of urban areas, Portland, Seattle, New York City, Washington, D.C., called a cycle track, where it actually has a two-way path, just similar to a trail that you're used to, only it is adjacent and right next to a traveled street. Sometimes these are generally called a protected cycle track, and that there's either a curb right here or a width of median or some type of barrier that keeps the two types of traffic separate. Here's a photo. This is actually in New York City, and here you can see they painted out kind of a median width, and then they're actually parking cars against it, so technically you have a barrier of parked cars between you and the moving traffic, but that creates a perfectly safe two-way bikeway right through that street. There's another one, I think this was in Seattle, but this shows a good transition to where there'd be a driveway or you're a pedestrian crosswalk where there's a change in elevation. And generally the cycle track is up 6 inches or up at curb height from the street, and in this case separated by a fairly wide median where down here it's probably a narrower median and probably some parking spaces. So in our case, this is not urban, this is rural. So this is a drawing of a cross section of a rural roadway. You can see the ditches here. This would be the gravel roadway top. The one thing these roads do have is quite a generous top to the roadway. So we looked at potentially taking some of that width, and this is all stuff we'd have to get worked through with the county road department. But we'd actually take some of that width and put in a raised cycle track with a curb height from the existing gravel road elevation there. We'd probably regrade the gravel road so that it would actually drain to the opposite ditch, because we don't want to necessarily drain against this curb. We don't have intakes or anything to handle the stormwater. And then the top of the cycle track would actually drain to the opposite ditch. Maybe we have to put a pipe in here to handle the ditch water if we end up covering it up. So this is kind of something that's a little innovative to try and solve our space issue, to try and keep that alignment A, if you will. So at this point, we have, here's a photo image of what that could look like on 128th Place, where you get a little bit of curb height and trail width. We envision this as being about 3 feet wide as median to be able to separate vehicular and trail traffic. Another view on 128th Place of how that would fit within the narrow right-of-way. Still trying to keep 2 lanes and probably shoulder on the other side. Another picture on 130th, so you can see it fitting within the power poles and generally keeping the same ditch line as much as possible. So we're getting to the point where, okay, it's time to kind of decide and either pull the trigger on survey and design and get this thing set in stone, or question it. Is this the right thing to do? Again, we talked about the dust before. We'd be putting this in next to a gravel roadway. You guys spray dust control or put something down that'll keep the dust down. Are the cars that are going by gonna toss a rock every once in a while? It's another thing to worry about. Are we back into paving this again to make this as nice as it could be? We got the use of farm equipment. You can imagine a big cultivator head coming down there at you as you're riding on the trail. Granted, I think you'll just get out of the way and it'll work, but it's still a challenge. And then, of course, snow removal will be different on whether the trail itself even gets plowed or exactly how snow removal works on the existing roadway. So it's, at this point is where we kind of came back to the board, and last month meeting kind of reviewed these issues. We took the board out on a site visit to review what we were looking at. Just because it really helps. You're seeing the benefit of pictures here, and it really helps to be out there and see it and imagine what it would be like to incorporate a trail. We took a look at alignment A and alignment C. We hadn't really talked much about, but this is the route that comes south out of Boughton on O Avenue down to Highway 141 right of way. And at that meeting, the board directed us to look at the feasibility of that alignment in alternative to the one we had been looking at, just to look it out, look to see if we're doing the right thing. And then they set the public meeting date for this meeting. So, back to the map. That alignment C is this route right here, and that alignment A, that portion that is really tight is this section, even though we really like that crossing on 169, and this railroad grade looks feasible. This is still a big challenge and potentially pretty good chunk of money to be able to build that piece. So looking down O Avenue, south of Boughton, we have another crossing of Beaver Creek. Beaver Creek's pretty much unavoidable anywhere we go here. And it comes down and then rides in the right of way, north right of way line of Highway 141. Not the most scenic place to ride, but as you'll see in a few pictures here, there's plenty of room. A little further along Highway 141, and then as it pulls into Perry, it would probably take off up Willis Avenue, and then all the routes as they get to Perry, generally there's some type of side path accommodation that gets to, I think, East Park, and then there's trail within East Park, and then there's, again, I think side paths that get you downtown. So this obviously isn't exactly what was, had been planned for up to this point, but it is something we do need to review. So looking at O Avenue, these pictures are due south out of Boughton. Again, not a bit of a challenging right-of-way here, pretty deep ditch section, but it is something where we think we can probably fit a trail in here. The west side of the road is a little more challenging, pretty steep foreslope down to a lower area. The right-of-way line is probably right about here. So again, we'd have to be benched out of the roadway foreslope. We have to have at least 5 feet of separation from the roadway edge to the trail edge. Again, crossing Beaver Creek, so we're looking at either an independent bridge or a widening of the existing bridge. And we turn down on Highway 141. This is actually looking west to the off-ramp to 169, and you can see the amount of space that's out there in the state's right-of-way. This is at the interchange. One tough part about this is we'd end up crossing 169 at grade. We'd have a crosswalk there, if you will. Whereas the other alignment, we're going underneath the bridge and avoiding Highway 169 traffic altogether. So this is where we cross 169 and then head up the ramp. That's kind of what the trail could look like, heading up that way. And then further down 141, you can see quite a bit of space out here in terms of right-of-way width. This is nearing the bend at Willis. That's what the trail could look like fitting in there. You can see we still retain a ditch in between. And still fit the trail in there pretty reasonably. So we're looking at comparing these to where we've got the cycle track need, maybe the need to pave that road, or deal with dust or rocks or what have you. At least it's a lower volume road than 141. 141 obviously has a lot of traffic, but we've got a pretty good distance off it in terms of accommodating the trail. One of the things we want to look at here is then this crash history. We had heard some issues of 130th having a number of run-off-the-road accidents, so we wanted to kind of check that out to make sure. So these are for a 10-year period, about a 10-year period. This is the total number of crashes. Take all the deer out of it. This is the total number of crashes. That's kind of stunning if you think about it. How many fewer crashes there are without the deer there. And then these are the types of crashes that are the run-off-the-road ones. And here we're looking at Highway 141, just in the westbound direction. The eastbound is distance, so we're not necessarily worried about the eastbound. But just looking at the westbound, and this is the crash history. Looking at 130th from Perry to Boughton, there's quite a decent number of run-off-the-road accidents, not too far away from 141. But look at the traffic difference in comparison. This is the annual average daily traffic, so this is about how many cars that roadway sees in a day versus 130th, it's only about 170, but still we got 5 run-off-the-road accidents. Some of the other streets, 130th, this is the paved county road between Boughton and Woodward. Pretty light accident history. The traffic is a step up from the gravel. And then O Avenue south out of Boughton has another step up in traffic. A few run-off-the-road accidents, and kind of similar issues. So looking at costs, these aren't, you got to keep in mind these aren't necessarily apples to apples because they don't like come from the same place and go to exactly the same place, but it is interesting on how they compare. Looking at alignment A as a railroad trail, plus running on 130th, leaving it gravel with a cycle track, is a total of $2.41 million. If we look at paving, 130th to get rid of the issues with that, it jumps quite a bit. So this is probably what maybe Mike was feeling when we started to decide on whether to pull the trigger in that alignment or not, was what this cost potential difference could be. And then alignment C, putting a trail along O Avenue and getting to Highway 141, $2.3 million. And then if we end up, one of the things we don't know is on O Avenue if the property owners are willing to sell us additional easement or not. That really helps in fitting the trail separate. But if we had to put a cycle track on O Avenue, at least that roadway is paved. cost is not terribly compelling. I'll let you know that generally any good grant funding mechanism that we can chase, there's several, and generally a $500,000 ask is a good grant. So you can tell by the total length of the project, we're upwards of $5 million, so we're looking at 10 of those grants trying to get this thing built. So we're looking at different phases. We've been concentrating on Perry to Fountain as kind of an early phase, wanting to make use of that railroad grade if it was available, and get that taken care of. But we've really looked at a bunch of options here, and there's a lot of things to consider. So with that, I'll turn back to questions.
Thank you, Rich.